Over the next few weeks, I'll be sharing a behind the scenes look into my maternity leave with a second baby, a maternity leave as a business owner, which is a lot different than that employer type maternity leave. And I've done this once before and actually took off 5.5 months when my first Colin was born. And I planned for 2.5 months that time, but took off longer due to a lot of different reasons. And this time I was more up in the air about how long exactly my leave would be, but ultimately thought I'd want to take anywhere from like 12 weeks, which is pretty standard here in the US, to around like 15 or 16 weeks. And ultimately, I took off around 15 weeks, so around 4 months, and about 1.5 weeks of that was before Ethan was born. And I will say, even as I calculate how much time I took off, it felt much more fluid than that. So not so rigid of like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm working now, all of a sudden I'm not. It felt much more fluid of like working some, because as business owners, we don't really ever like completely stop the business, But in this episode, I'm going to share a behind the scenes look at how I planned that leave, what I had to do to prepare my business for me to be gone that long, or even longer if I had chosen to, stay gone longer, and what I would do differently, what worked well, what didn't, and also some things I did differently from my first maternity leave I ever planned, which again was like close to 3 years ago now, when Colin was born. So you can apply this stuff too to another type of business leave. So if you want just like tips and thoughts for like, hey, I want to plan time away from my business to go on a vacation or take a sabbatical or anything like that, you will enjoy this episode. This stuff applies to other types of leaves too. And if you're listening thinking like, hey, I'm not having a baby or any other kind of leave anytime soon, but you like enjoy this podcast and this topic interests you of like taking time away from your business, scaling your business to a point that you can take time away, there's a lot of solid business tips in this episode that relate to that, of like scaling a business to a point that you can step away and still be earning money. Plus, I'm just sharing some real behind the scenes into how I run my business, which I know you guys love that type of stuff on the podcast, and I love sharing it too. So come back next week as well, or binge the next episodes if you're listening to this later, because I'm also going to share after this one like what maternity leave actually looked like, just a deep dive into that of like, hey, like behind the scenes, both the personal level and business perspective, what it looked like, and then also how I'm planning for my work hours and schedule to look like in this new season of life with 2 little kids. So let's get to it. I'm excited to share. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, an online educator for entrepreneurs, website designer, wife, boy mom, and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want to dive deep into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a sustainable business that fits your unique lifestyle while standing out in a crowd, then you are in the right place. I created a multiple 6-figure a year business in my early 20s, and now in my 30s, I'm still running that successful multiple 6-figure a year business on just part-time hours now as a working mom. I'm here to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning, because I believe that the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, website design, personal branding, mindset, time management as a busy parent, scalable and passive income, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. All right, guys. So as I'm recording this episode, reflecting on the planning of a 4-ish month maternity leave, I'm actually back to work as I'm recording this, and Ethan is 4 months old. Well, he'll be 4 months in like a week or so. So again, I kind of started back to work when he was about 3.5 months old. And then I had taken some time off before he was born as well. So I did not work all the way up until like the day I went into labor. But it's so interesting as a business owner going back to work, at least for me, because it has not been a like, you're not working at all. You are completely on maternity leave. You have not opened your email. You haven't opened Slack. You don't know anything to like, wow, now you're working every day. It's all much more subtle and fluid than that, right? Like I was plugged into my business the whole time I was on maternity leave. The first few weeks were a bit more like, I'm really like not looking at anything, but generally speaking, I was plugged in. And even coming back, it's been more like, okay, I had 1 week where I worked like one day. Okay. And like, was that coming back? Was it not? I don't know. I did have like a full work day that week. But that was it kind of thing. So, I'm still home. I still work from home. My baby is still home and I'm Ethan's like primary childcare in the season. So as I'm coming back to work right now, I'm coming back with just 2 work days a week. So really limited still. And this is only, as I'm recording this, my second week of having like the 2 work days a week. So to some people, this might be like, wait, you're not even working. What are you talking about? You're back from leave 2 days a week isn't really working. But my business is really lean and I'm able to work less and still see growth actually, which is something I'm going to share about in this episode, and keep things stable still. So when you're a business owner though, it's hard to truly take off all the way. And I know that's true too of some jobs you might have with an employer, but it's especially true as a business owner. But I do take off the best I can. And I did for both my leaves. And I'm not someone personally who struggles with like taking time off from work for a new baby. I know that's something I've heard other business owners share sometimes, like, wait, like you're already back recording a podcast episode when you're like 2 weeks postpartum or something. And that is not me at all. I definitely love that time. And if anything, I'm someone who struggles more to get back into the swing of things, while at the same time weirdly being hit with like tons of great business ideas while I'm on leave. That's like a time I feel super creative, is like in that time when I'm unplugged from the day to day and I get all these cool ideas for reels or podcast episodes or new products, pivots in the business and things like that. So I've had a lot of that during my leave. But generally just want to say I'm someone who like, I want to take off as much time as makes sense for my business, as much time as I can prep for. And I really enjoy that period because the truth is like they're only the stage for so long. And I know I kind of hate hearing that as a parent personally, the whole like cherish it while you can, but it is true. And so I'm like, I want to soak up these really little days and focus on recovering myself, focus on bonding with my new baby. And the beauty of that is as a business owner, we can set things up in such a way that allows us to do that. And in my mind, I'm kind of like, what's the point of owning a business if you're not going to take time away from the business to do things you love, if you're going to just treat it like a 9-to-5? So anyway, that's kind of my perspective. And I love taking time off. I've loved both my maternity leave. So I want to share with you how I plan it though. So first of all, during my pregnancy, I went on 2 trips with Show It that happened basically immediately finding I was pregnant. So first trimester trips for the win in the like super hot heat of Arizona summer. Very intense, not a win, kind of hard, but really fun as well. So that was the way I kind of started off the like planning for maternity leave time, you could say, because I like to start planning pretty quickly when I find out I'm pregnant. I've done that both times. And then I also decided to make another course during pregnancy. So I made Booked Out Designer during my pregnancy with Colin, literally start to finish, like was created during that pregnancy. And weirdly, I kind of was thinking like, oh, I probably won't do that again. I was like, oh, that was like a one-time thing. I just made a course while I was pregnant, but I got the itch again. So like literally same thing. I got the itch of like, oh, I really want to make a course. So I ended up making Podcast Success Blueprint while I was pregnant, but also had a toddler, which was also so much different than when I made Booked Out Designer, because at that point I was able to work whenever I wanted and had energy for, and was really able to like just only focus on that and nesting stuff. This time I feel like I had a whole lot more to focus on, but I did it. And I beta launched that course in October last year. And then I created it basically my whole pregnancy, same as Booked Out Designer. And then I opened the doors again in January and then I closed them. And now the course is on Evergreen and available if you'd like to join it. But with that being said, during my pregnancy itself, I felt like this go around, I was really focused on like super intensely creating that course, right? And on maternity leave prep, plus maintaining everything happening in the business. And so from a business perspective, that was it really. And I did not launch anything else besides that course. I did some sales and some things like that, but generally that was my focus. And those things alone were plenty to keep me very busy. The course itself was plenty without having to plan maternity leave on top of it. But that was kind of my focus. And similar to my pregnancy with Colin, I started planning the leave as soon as I found I was pregnant, and then I worked on it as I had time and as I had solutions and answers for like how I was going to navigate things. And if you are pregnant and planning a maternity leave, I always recommend starting earlier in your time of expecting and waiting for the baby if you're able to. I know with things like adoption, you can't always plan as much, right? Like you may not know when the baby is coming, and that's really hard. But if you're able to, starting earlier of just like, this is like potentially what the plan will be. And this is the things that need to be delegated beforehand. I need to talk to this team member about this thing. Is starting all that earlier is really great because you will lose energy around it. Often as you get later into pregnancy, and by those like last month, I would say, maybe definitely the last week, so potentially the last month, you just want to be in baby nesting mode. And so it's really hard to get motivated to do the things you need to do for your business. So it's something I like working on whole pregnancy. And I always have, I did this time, but like kept a rolling note in my phone on my notes app of just like anytime I thought of something, I'm like, oh, this team member needs to know this thing, or oh, this random thing I need to make sure I do before he's born, put it in there. And then I mapped it all out later in a ClickUp, which I'm going to get into. But anyway, that's just some perspective there. So now let me talk about planning the leave. So I did it really similar to how it was when I prepped for Colin to be born, only this time with more experience. And some of the things that for Colin, for that maternity leave, that I had to really focus on delegating and eliminating was already done because, 3 years ago now, we set into place that like, okay, Elizabeth no longer does this random thing in the business. And I did not take the thing back on after maternity leave. So an example of that is before Colin was born, I was the one responsible for chasing down failed payments. And if you run any kind of business where you have subscriptions and digital products, I'm talking about failed payments. That's the thing. People's credit card fails. You have to reach out and try to get them to pay. And I was the one doing that on my own. And then when, for my maternity leave with Colin, I was like, okay, realistically, I can't keep doing this. I need help. So that got delegated and it kept being delegated, right? So there was a lot of things like that. And that made it nice and easier because there was less stuff where I was like, okay, Elizabeth's the only one that knows how to do this and whatnot. So that made it a lot more helpful. And another thing that was helpful the second go around is that Ethan was born at a totally different time of year. I actually have like opposite season babies. So Colin was born at the beginning of fall and Ethan was born at the beginning of spring. So that made for an easier leave because with Colin, he was born early September, which meant that during my maternity leave, if I was to have it as long as I wanted it to be, I would need to be planning Black Friday, which was what happened, right? And that was kind of hard on maternity leave. So it was nice to just be like completely away from that big sale. And ultimately during my leave, I did do like one small sale on my templates, but I did not do any launches or anything like that. I was just like unplugging from all of that. So I use a ClickUp system for planning a leave and mapping things out nearing the due date that I just love. I literally have it month by month of like my pregnancy of what all needs to happen, both in work life and also things like writing thank you notes for the shower, freezer meal prepping and just all buying a crib. I literally put like everything on there like that. And I really love that system. I did a similar thing for Colin and then this time did it in ClickUp. And I want to hear from you if this is something that interests you as you're listening. And if you're listening way into the future, it might already be an offer, but I plan to make that template and some other helpful resources I have around planning maternity leaves into a mini offer that is for sale on my website at some point. So if that interests you, let me know because it's something that has been on my heart for a while and like even more spinning with ideas for it at this point. I think I have a lot of stuff that could be helpful to kind of have a mini course that comes with templates around that. So if that interests you, let me know. But anyway, when I think about the biggest things I had to prep before my leave, it was these categories. So first, internal communication things for our team of like, how are we going to communicate with each other, with me out of office? How am I going to know what's happening? How are they going to communicate with each other if needed? Stuff like that. And then autoresponders and outward communication. So to people who email me and to who email our team, what's said, podcast episodes, that is a huge one. We'll get into like decisions around like, do you keep airing episodes? What do you do there? Social media content is another thing that I had to prep and plan. And then any sales or promotions, like kind of deciding on that of like, hey, are we going to run sales? Is there going to be any promotions? And then projects happening behind the scenes with my team, because when you do have a team, a nice thing is that you could be on leave and still be moving the needle forward on some projects in your business that you're just like overseeing, but are less involved in, right? So anyway, I'm going to walk through all 6 of those categories and tell you what I did to plan for them and how it ultimately went. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Okay, so first let's talk about internal team communication. And if you don't have a team, just still listen to this. This is going to be helpful even regardless if you have a team in your business. My team is all contractors, so just to put that context out there. But when I was on leave with Colin, we were not using Slack or ClickUp yet. We were actually using Voxer and Basecamp back then. So different setup for my business just 3 years ago. And my team also looked different. I had less people on my team at that point and a bit more... less people is the best way to put it. People in different roles. I was doing a lot more of the stuff myself as well, versus some things that are delegated now that weren't 3 years ago. But anyway, I like using Slack so much more than using Voxer when it comes to team communication with multiple people. It's way more effective. Voxer things get lost, and it's the heavy emphasis on audio. I think Voxer is great for a lot of things, but for like your team to just all be talking in a chat, I don't think it's great. So anyway, I had to decide what's the setup, what's the expectation within Slack and with ClickUp for how we're going to communicate. And I was planning this mentally, like my whole pregnancy, of thinking about like, okay, do I make a channel for maternity leave? Like what stuff do I want someone to message me on Slack about versus just leaving it in ClickUp and me finding it in ClickUp because I got an email from ClickUp about it. Anyway, I was like having to think about that, right? And I had multiple rounds of like, does this make sense? Does that make sense? And this was a really important decision for me because I wanted to be in touch with what was happening in the business, but not feel like I'm bombarded with things to do or stressed out about something that's not a huge deal or, getting just too much information. So I made the whole plan though of like officially like, okay, here's what I'm doing in early February. So a month before my due date. And y'all, hilariously, I struggled in my pregnancy pretty intensely with pregnancy insomnia. And there were a lot of nights where I would like wake up, struggle to fall back asleep. And I would just lay in bed, just trying like, let me just please fall asleep. And this one night I gave up and I woke up with insomnia at like 3 a.m., 2 a.m. or something like that. And I went downstairs, made some coffee and worked for a few hours and mapped out this whole plan for my maternity leave, for our team communication, all the things mapped out in the ClickUp and in the middle of the night, right? And it felt so good to have it done. And that was like a pro moment, you could say, for my pregnancy insomnia, because I was like up and active and got a lot of good information out for like, got that plan out, really planned well. So the plan lived in ClickUp documents. And then the plan that was mainly executed in Slack. And again, I might make like an ebook or audio course type of thing on this at some point with the templates and all of that. But I had in ClickUp documents for all these categories. And again, this is similar to what I did with Colin, but at that point I did it all in Google Drive. So I had one doc for important dates and contact info. That was just like me telling the team, like, this is my due date. This is like when I anticipate coming back, things like that. My plan for unplugging, which that document, I really was like, I've shared about this before on the podcast, but I think it's so important to share with your team mission, vision type things in your business. So this was basically me telling my team, like, hey, this is my second maternity leave. Here's my desire and my hope for what unplugging is going to look like for me. And by me telling them that can help them help me be able to achieve that in the way that they show up in the business as well. So that's basically what that document was. I even had some like things to be praying for with the birth and with postpartum life, just all kind of laid out in there. And then the third thing was best methods for communicating about different things. So I literally shared, okay, Slack or ClickUp based on urgency and like where different things should go. And then I had a document about the new maternity leave Slack channel I made. And then a document as well about managing inbox notes and different requests we get and how to reply, plus info on all the canned emails I made. So I made a bunch of canned emails and then I'm like, hey, here, if we get this request, here's what to say. If we get this request, here's what to say. And that was mainly for Stacy, who manages the inbox. So I shared that with my team. Everyone read over it. And then we all had one-on-ones scheduled before my leave in the month of February. If you heard me share Ethan's birth story, which was a bit of a few episodes back, but go listen to that one. It's such a beautiful story of like God working through a challenging, strange experience into a beautiful like C-section delivery. So anyway, though, but I shared in that I actually had my first like early labor signs after I had 2 final meetings with 2 team members, Stacy and Kara. And then the next day it was like, boom, I'm starting to have the labor signs. But in the month of February, I did those one-on-one talking through the document, asked team members like, hey, do you have any questions? Like, let's touch base. This all makes sense. And we talked about some other things as well. So anyway, I feel like that document setup went really smooth. And I also would say as well, the way I did a maternity leave Slack channel and I had like all these automation things in it. Again, it's something, if you want more details on it, you can message me, but I might share that again in like an ebook format or something like that at some point. But I really loved the setup there in Slack. I think it worked well. I think my team agrees that it worked well. And I felt like because of the way it was all set up, I was able to know what was going on while still being unplugged, generally speaking. Again, like those first, like, I would say like 2 weeks, maybe it all blurs together, but maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I really was just like, I'm not messaging anyone. I'm not even opening the inbox. I don't really know what's happening. I'm posting some on Instagram, but like generally I'm unplugged. And then after that, it was like more like, okay, I'm going to read what's going on in Slack. I'm going to message back about this and that. I might open my laptop a little bit, things of that nature. Okay. So anyway, that was the first thing though, that I had to set up was that internal communication plan and really just like the hub for all things maternity leave, which lived in ClickUp. Next I had my autoresponder and plan for outward communication. So that was mainly something between me and Stacy, who manages the inbox, and she does awesome. If you've ever emailed me, you may have emailed with her. And I made some canned emails in our email software for her to use. And they were actually really similar to what I used with Colin. I just kind of updated them to like make more sense for this season and this pregnancy. And then I also set up an autoresponder on my personal email that said I was out of office. On our other emails that are like for customer support or new business inquiries, those did not have an autoresponder. It was just like business as usual. But if someone was trying to email me directly, an autoresponder came up, again, similar to what I'd used in my last pregnancy because it worked really well. And I will say, I cannot recommend using an autoresponder enough when you are out of office like this. It just gives you so much more peace of mind because I did get to a point where like I was opening the inbox just from my phone because it's hard for me to like ignore the inbox even when I'm on leave. I just kind of like habit will like open it and see what's happening. And I would get some emails that were important. And I'm like, yes, it feels good to me to know that this person immediately got notified that like that I'm on leave and not to expect me to be able to like engage with this immediately. And then Stacy would email the people back and tell them like, hey, she's flagging this for me for when I'm back. But it was just nice for me to know that those like emails were taken care of. So can't recommend that enough. Putting up the autoresponder, even if you are on leave and plan to respond to them and be engaged in that way, still having the autoresponder up is really helpful. Okay, next thing I had to prep, and this was probably the biggest thing I had to prepare for the maternity leave, was podcast episodes for this show. And it can feel like a lot of work because you're prepping ahead, right? While also just recording episodes for like that month when you're not on leave yet, which for podcasting, you'd like to be at least 1 week ahead, right? So it's like you're already having to do that. And then you're prepping additionally for months later. And then there's a lot of decisions, right? Like, do you stop airing episodes and just take a break from your podcast? That's an option. Do you record anything in real time? Like, are you going to leave gaps in your episode schedule to just like while you're on leave, step back, go and record an episode? I think you could recast stuff. You could recast, old episodes of yours, recast episodes of you and other shows. Are you going to do interviews or not? Are you going to air any interviews? It's going to be all solo episodes. I mean, it's a lot to decide. And I had someone message me the other day asking like for advice on this as a podcaster. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this. It's all about where you are in your business and how much time you have to prep ahead. But I prepped for this leave better than I did with Colin's maternity leave, which I feel really proud of. With his, I did not go as far out. I think I did prep about 2.5 months, which is why when I first talked about that maternity leave, I said I prepared for a 2.5 month maternity leave. It ultimately took more like 5.5 months. But I did not prep that far in advance because of Black Friday looming. And I was feeling like I needed to record in real time for Black Friday, which makes sense. It was like, I can't think that far ahead yet. And so I stopped and then, had to record live. So I think for that one, I batched a lot less, but for this leave, I wish I had the exact number. It was kind of hard for me to remember like what was recorded when. But I think I batched 15 episodes for this leave, which again, y'all, that feels like so many. 15 episodes. A lot of those were solo episodes of me coming up with content to be able to, air in this podcast, and a lot of work, right? That's why I say this was like one of the biggest things in my maternity leave prep. And so it was a mix of things though. So I recast 2 episodes that were interviews with me on other podcasts, which I thought was like, just a cool way to do it. Like those were, you guys may have heard it, but those 2 episodes were like interviews I'd done recently-ish that I really enjoyed. And I was like, I'd love for people to hear those who maybe did not go listen to me on that podcast. And then I had 3 interviews that I pre-recorded with guests, then a bunch of solo episodes, and then 2 recasts of old solo episodes of mine. So all in all, there were 4 recasted things in those 15 episodes. And again, then 3 interviews and everything else was solo episodes. And I was really strategic too of mapping out when things would happen. So for example, one of the recasts happened the week that I assumed correctly that I would have a newborn baby on my hands and might not be like wanting to promote an episode as much on social media. So I said, okay, I'm going to pick a recast for this week. And then the next week when I'm able to promote more, I'm going to air something that I'm going to want to email about more and promote more heavily on social media. I also left one gap in my podcast pipeline for me to do the birth story episode if I wanted to. If I had decided I don't want to record the birth story, I had another episode from that was going to go last in the batch that would have gotten moved up. And I also tried varying things a lot. So I tried to make sure in the mapping out of things that I'm not airing 3 motherhood episodes in a row or 3 web design episodes in a row, but varied up. So ultimately I looked at this 3-month period and episode ideas, and I had them all mapped in and moved around in such a way that it's an interview here, then 2 weeks later, another interview, etc. So it's not all too many things at once. And my podcast team worked on these things not in advance. So that's worth noting. I got ahead by recording everything, providing the notes for my team about what needs to happen with each episode. But in real time, they were working on it at whatever pace they wanted to. So I did have communication with them every week for episodes, about these are the title ideas and things like that, which was fine. That was done mainly over Slack and then some on ClickUp as well. So that worked really well. And again, I think I really like the way I prepped podcast content. I like that I prepped a bit farther than I did last time. And for me, during my leave, again, after those first 3-ish weeks, Tuesday became a bit of a work day for me because that's the day this podcast airs. And so I would always on Tuesdays be okay, I got to make sure the email goes out. I got to make sure that I share about the episode a little bit on social media. And sometimes I didn't, right? There were some days that I was just I didn't share about it at all, and that's fine because I was really just in mama mode. But generally I tried to do that. And I also recorded a few reels ahead of time for some of the specific episodes that I felt particularly inspired by. So I was I'm going to make a video to promote this, but I mainly was doing social media content to promote the episodes in real time. It probably would have been easier if it was all prepped. I kind of tried to do that at one point, but I lost energy around it again. That last month, I'm okay, I have less energy around making sure there's a reel for this episode. So I ended up not doing it. Okay, so now let's talk about the next category, and this relates well to what we were saying of social media prepping. So with my maternity leave with Colin, social media was so different at the time. There was lots more it was like the days of like an image with a caption posting back then, even though reels were already a thing. It was much less video driven back then though. So content was a lot easier then, honestly, like while I was on leave. But for this leave, I was trying to focus more on making some video content. So I want to say just one prep day for social media where I did a lot of shirt changes, recorded some different things. And ironically, a lot of the stuff I prepared during that time, I never posted. I still have like as drafts on Instagram. I ended up feeling like less inspired by it when the time came to post. And generally speaking, on my leave, I felt less engaged on social media and less of a need to show up this time around. With Colin's maternity leave, I was still posting a whole lot, posting more behind the scenes of mom stuff and posting about episodes constantly on my podcast and things like that. But this time, I would go days at a time, not posting anything or even opening Instagram, not even posting stories. And I really liked that. Like I wanted to unplug intensely, and it was a real gift to get to do that this time. Since I didn't do that as much with Colin, I was more like sharing everything. I enjoyed the privacy more this time around of posting less. But then when I felt inspired, like really going for it. So like a few content pieces that I made while on maternity leave, I really, really loved. And I had a document going on my notes app my whole leave with social media ideas that would come to me just randomly, like, oh, that'd be a cool reel, that'd be hilarious or whatever. And then I would make them as I was able to. And funny enough, I actually made a whole lot of the reels I posted during my leave while I was holding Ethan, rocking him in a dark nursery while he napped. That would be like a content creation time for me. Just, working from my phone, holding him, making something using B-roll or video I recorded previously. And it worked really well. So I can't say I do anything differently on the social media prep, honestly, when I think about this leave. Like I prepped a little bit, not too much. I definitely think prepping a little bit was important. It would be a lot harder to have not prepped anything. It would have been easier if I had made more in advance to post. But I think like what ultimately happened with even the planned stuff is I would have something planned. I have it on my content calendar. Like, okay, I'm doing these two posts this week. And then I would forget to post because again, I'm not engaged on social media very much. And I just kept delaying it and kept delaying it. So that was happening. So I'm like, I don't even know if it would have helped to have prepped more in advance, but if you are planning a maternity leave or another kind of leave from your business, I would recommend prepping some social content in advance that's like completely ready to go. And maybe you do have it a bit on like a content calendar, but you're flexible with it, right? So maybe you have this content calendar, like this is supposed to go out this time, but then it's more so you ultimately are like, okay, today's a Wednesday, the baby's napping, I have a bit of time, I'm going to like post this reel and oh wait, look, it's completely ready to go with like the caption, the things recorded and edited and all that going on. I think that'd be really helpful. So that's it on like the social media front. Now let's talk about sales and promotions. And then lastly, I want to talk about projects, internal projects in the business. So Ethan was born on March 5th, and I actually had a leap day because this year's a leap year sale going when he was born. I thought it was super possible that he was going to be a leap day baby, but he wasn't. Born a bit after that, but I had a leap day sale going on when he was born. And gosh, y'all, talk about pregnancy brain. I set it up with the wrong code. So like literally I was like just impromptu, I'm going to run a leap day sale. That'll be fun. Why not? And I made a coupon code for it. And then I put a banner on my website of like, leap day sale, use code, whatever the code was. And for days, like no one was buying anything. I'm like, that's weird. Like people aren't using the coupon code. Like people were buying templates, but then not using the coupon code. And then we got an email from someone saying that like, wait, the coupon code doesn't work. And I realized that like I made a code that was completely different than what I put on the website. So very much a super into pregnancy executed sale. But generally with the timing of his birth and thinking about the time of my maternity leave, I decided no sales or launches while I was on leave and even none immediately when I returned, which was so great and so needed. I did do a quick Memorial Day sale that I just put on my website, on my website banners and sent one email about, and that was it. And y'all, talk about the beauty of an online business, like made lots of Memorial Day sales and really did not market the sale much. I think I posted like a story about it on Instagram maybe, but didn't make a huge ordeal about it and still made sales during that time. And also worth noting, if you're not familiar with my business, I sell courses and show it website templates. So I have two different online courses, one for starting and scaling a podcast and one for designers on how to build a booked out and in-demand business as a brand and website designer. And then my show it templates. So my products are all evergreen, which is the business model I just absolutely love for this season of life. So I'm not doing live launches where it's like, hey, the course is open, you can only buy it right now, and then another time of year you can't buy it. Things are always for sale. And that works really well, right? For planning a maternity leave, because money can keep coming into the business. People can still access your products while you are away. And so, yeah, I really love that. But like I already said, with Colin being born in early September, it was close to Black Friday, and Black Friday happened while I was still on leave. So I did have to like plan that go around while I was on maternity leave, plan and execute it. So this time it was really nice to just be like, hey, not only running a sales, I did literally, again, decided to run a quick Memorial Day sale, but generally was not doing any big promotions. And if you are able to do that with your maternity leave, I would recommend it because it's really nice to just be like, hey, I'm making this decision not to do this and to scale back in that way and just focus on the new mama life. Okay. And then the last thing was projects happening in the business while I was on leave. That was something I had to plan of like, hey, is there anything I want to ask my team members to work on while I'm away? Any things we want to tackle that I can still oversee, but maybe I'm not like the one directly doing it. So it's okay that I'm like out of office during. So that's a really fun thing about having people work with you. You can have like things happening in the business growing and new goals being accomplished even when you're not working. So we had a few projects that were actually tackled while I was on leave. And then I was like, again, back how you just aren't ever fully on leaving your business owner. I would be checking in on Slack and clicking up a lot of times for my phone, approving things, giving feedback, asking follow-up questions, checking in on statuses of projects and getting things all the way implemented and things like that. So some of the projects though, redesigning all my freebies into the new brand look. So if you didn't know, I underwent a rebrand with new logos, fonts, and colors. And I'm actually right now, as we speak, working on redesigning my website. And it's a very big undertaking. It's an over 100-page website. I will definitely do probably multiple podcast episodes walking you guys through like what this rebrand and redesign of the website process has been like. It's really fun. I'm loving just getting into my website and like reimagining like, okay, starting my blog over from zero. What do I want to look like? Like what features do I want to have? And then just like building stuff from scratch. So that's really fun. But there are, with this rebrand, there's a lot of different elements to it, right? Like before my leave, I actually updated all my carts and all my receipts, sales receipts for all my products to be the new branding, right? So there's stuff like that. I did that one. But then redesigning freebies into the new brand look was one thing that a designer on my team did. And so I was like approving and commenting to things to her and giving her feedback. But I assigned her all that before my leave, and I made her a video, made her a whole document, like here's all the things to do, here's all the stuff assigned to you. And then I think when I was like a month or a month and a half into my maternity leave is when she decided to start on it. Because I told her like, hey, you start whenever you want. And so that all got accomplished, all the freebies redesigned. And then she was like redesigning them, like just the visual. And then I was going in and saying like, okay, I want to actually update the content on some of these. And so I would do that again from my laptop whenever she had some for me to look at. Another thing that got accomplished was new social media graphics to go with the new branding to use as needed on like Instagram stories, new blog post graphics to promote offers, some new Pinterest graphics, just again, like a lot of random graphic type things that I was approving, but not directly designing. Another thing that happened was taking Podcast Success Blueprint evergreen. So I actually got everything 100% ready for this to happen before my leave. And then when Ethan was like 2 or 3 weeks old, I did it myself of like, turning the page on, turning the funnel on, and brought all that live. And I did not do any kind of big announcement when it happened. But then a few weeks later on this podcast, actually, there was the episode with my podcast equipment guide, which you can get that at elizabethmccravey.com/record. But with that freebie being released, that was also the time that the course went evergreen. And then I had a few freebies launch that went with podcast episodes during my leave as well. So one was the Teams check-in freebie, all about like how to do a weekly team check-in with your team on Slack. And then my podcast equipment guide. So both of those were designed during maternity leave, but like written and planned by me before the leave happened. But then like all the final stuff and all the automations and setting up and ConvertKit and things like that all happened later. So that was one project. And then weekly episode emails going out, weekly podcast episodes going out. Again, that's more of like an ongoing thing, but there was always like something generally for me to do and check in on with that. And there probably are some other things, right, that were projects I'm forgetting. Obviously still continuing to like respond to inquiries for templates, and questions about courses, me checking in with my Facebook group communities for my courses. That was like some ongoing stuff, but those mainly were like the projects happening while I was away. And a few last thoughts on like the prepping and kind of what that looked like for me. So I originally had myself doing some one-on-one consulting meetings at 38 and a half and 38 weeks pregnant. Okay. Like I had them on the calendar, and that happened because of me thinking as my earlier in pregnancy self of like, oh yeah, I'm going to work up until maternity leave this time, because with Colin, I stopped working 2 weeks before my due date. He was ultimately born at 41 weeks. So I had 3 weeks where I decided I'm not working. I did not have any other children yet. And ultimately I got so antsy waiting to go into labor that I was stressing myself out, and ended up deciding to like do some work things. So I was just like getting bored and again, antsy. And so this time I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to work basically up until he's born, but I did want my meetings to stop before then. But I had some still on the calendar for 37 and 38 weeks pregnant. And ultimately, like when I got that close to the end of pregnancy, and I started having some like early labor stuff happening, I ultimately asked those people to reschedule for after Ethan was born. Again, just so be at the end of pregnancy. And I was also feeling myself more in nesting mode, in privacy mode. I was struggling with the pregnancy insomnia, and I was like, I just can't do it. And when I was feeling quite overwhelmed actually in that like last month before he was born by the pregnancy to-do list, and the postpartum to-do list and the business to-do list. And I had to ask myself, and this might be something that someone listening needs, as you're listening, as you're like planning your own leave, but I'd ask myself like, okay, what can go of everything on this list that I'm feeling so overwhelmed by, like what could go? And those meetings were one thing that I was like, hey, I bet if I ask these incredible women who have scheduled consulting calls with me, if they would mind waiting like 2 or 3 more months to do it, they will probably be okay rescheduling. So I sent just a really honest email being like, hey, I'm beat. I don't know that I can show up for you as well on this consulting call as I would like to. Would you be okay rescheduling? And yeah, it was really awesome. Everyone said yes. And so that was fine. And so that helped free up like from some mental space for me to like close out things I needed to in the business well. And then also, right, there were other things happening. Like I was trying to do freezer meals, get the nursery ready, write thank you cards for baby showers. Like you have a lot more doctor's appointments at the end of pregnancy. And I just felt like I couldn't take on anything else. So that was a little shift in kind of how I showed up at the end of pregnancy. And like I said, I was generally this time working up until my due date, but really scaled down a lot at the end. Like I made it to where like there was nothing pressing or urgent at the end of pregnancy, but it was more like, hey, I can work on this if I want to type of projects and as I have energy, which was nice. So I did have a bit more time, like, in the last weeks before Ethan was born, there were a lot of Tuesdays and Thursdays where we all were just doing stuff together as a family, and me and Adam both didn't work at all. We're going to Chick-fil-A, going to the park, and just having big family days with Colin, which I really loved, and so cherished that. So that was kind of how things looked at the end. And I did do freezer meal prepping again, like I did last time. I cannot recommend that enough as you prepare for the postpartum season of making some meals, casseroles, baked pastas, soups, like whatever you want. Breakfast food for sure is helpful. I love making these like oatmeal muffin bites. I love making lactation cookies. Can't recommend enough though to do that kind of prep, because you're not going to feel like cooking. And if you have a meal train, which I hope you do, but if you have a meal train, it eventually ends, and then those freezer meals become so helpful. But I did that this go around with the help of Adam and my mother-in-law at 37 weeks pregnant, and really got to enjoy those meals for like about 2.5 months before we ran out of them. So that combined with our meal train was a really awesome part of the maternity leave. So yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but that's kind of what the planning for the maternity leave looked like. And again, I think it went really well. My business did really well. I'll share this more next week, talking about like how it actually looked, but my business did really well financially the whole time I was out of office. I was still getting new customers and sales. The podcast was still thriving, like all of those things. So really, really grateful for that. And next week, I'll be sharing what the leave was actually like on a personal and professional level. So sharing behind the scenes of like postpartum life as a new mom of 2, and then also like what the business running really looked like behind the scenes and some personal things that happened with that, adjusting to 2 kids, how planning the leave worked out in real time, how the business did financially, and then some things I did on maternity leave. Like y'all, on maternity leave, I went to the beach, a family beach trip, and I potty trained my toddler. So I'll be talking about that next week. So come back for that. And then after that, I'm going to share another episode about what life is looking like right now as I'm coming back from maternity leave as a mom of 2, and kind of like what I'm doing differently than I was last time from maternity leave. And then at the meantime, if you want more episodes about planning a leave from your business, for you to check out, I'll link these in the show notes, but episode 139, that's where I share how I planned that 2.5 month maternity leave with Colin. Episode 158 is where I share about what the maternity leave was actually like with Colin, like behind the scenes of that. And then 157, I share a lot of different things I learned in my postpartum experience as a first-time mom. So those are all going to be helpful episodes to you if this is an interesting topic. And again, if you haven't yet, scroll back and listen to Ethan's birth story too, because that's a really powerful and fun episode. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope this gets your brain spinning for different ideas for planning time away from your own business. And I hope you'll listen again next week when we talk more about what my maternity leave really looked like behind the scenes. So that's it. And again, if you're an expecting mom right now, listening to this, I just want to say, you're doing amazing. Pregnancy is really hard. Running a business while pregnant is really hard. Planning this leave on top of everything you're already doing is really hard, and you're doing amazing. Like wherever you are in the process, you're doing amazing. Keep going. It'll all be worth it when you get to have that planned time away where you're just snuggling your baby, enjoying that phase, not having to worry about work. So that's it. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you got so much value from this episode. If you're a fellow podcaster or you hope to start a podcast in the near future, then you need to check out my program, Podcast Success Blueprint. This course is truly podcasting from A to Z. I cover all the getting started steps like naming your show, creating intros and outros, cover art design, and all things podcast tech. And that's where most podcast courses stop. But Podcast Success Blueprint is literally just getting started at that point. You'll go on to learn things like how to create successful solo episodes and interview episodes, how to market your podcast and grow your listeners, how to create streamlined systems so that your podcast does not take over your life, how to make real money from your show. Yes, real money from your podcast, one of my absolute favorite modules. And we even dive into things like guesting on other podcasts to grow your business and hiring a team to help you manage your show. Yes, it is beyond the basics, and I'm teaching you everything you need to know to grow a successful show that is the top of funnel marketing strategy for your business. Head to elizabethmccravy.com/PSB, short for Podcast Success Blueprint, to get all the details and join this incredible program. I hope I can help you in this program as you build your podcast and market your business. All right, that's it, friends. I cannot wait to connect with you again next week. Bye for now.